Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Miguel Perez. I am the head of public programming, and it is my pleasure to welcome you guys to what I'm sure will be a very fun conversation tonight. The Phillips Collection is turning 100 years this year, which is pretty exciting and very a big milestone, I think, for any institution. And part of what we're doing to celebrate our centennial year is we have invited a handful of artists from around the DMV to reimagine our logo at the Phillips Collection. And Trap Bob, who you guys are all here to see tonight, is the next in a long line of wonderful artists who have kind of put their own stamp on our logo, on our centennial logo. And Trap Bob, I will say, yours, I think I told you over the phone, yours is one of my favorites and is absolutely out of this world, if I can reuse that joke. A little bit about Trap Bob. Trap Bob is a visual artist, illustrator, and animator based in Washington, D.C. She is known for her use of bold colors and gestures to convey both the humor and struggles of everyday life. Her work is socially conscious and frequently inspired by activism and community issues, with an aim to bridge the gap between her audience and the message and her message. Her work can be found in both digital spaces and within the community, from Instagram GIF stickers to permanent murals throughout Washington, D.C. Tonight, Trap Bob is going to be in conversation with Carl Nard, local photographer. Carl Maynard, an Air Force veteran and community organizer, is the founder of Walk with Locals, a photo community founded in Washington, D.C. that lives by the principles of know your city, know your neighbors, community built of inclusivity. What started as a small local photo meetup community has since launched into a worldwide community through the use of the hashtag #WalkWithLocals tag. Their walks are free to attend, and all skill levels of photography are welcome to join. So thank you both for being here tonight. I am going to pass it on to you. Carl, I'll just start sharing my screen and you guys can go from there.
Awesome. Trap, what's up?
Nothing, man, I'm excited. We're
Ready
back
to talk?
again. Yes.
We're doing this again. So first and foremost, let me just say thank you really quick to all of our everybody joining. I wish we could see everybody's faces, but we can't. But thank you so much for joining us. This is actually the second time I've gotten to interview Trap Bob. Once was already super sweet, and it was on IG Live when we were all moving to mobile interviews and doing those. And then lastly, just a super quick and very loud thank you to you. When you reached out to have me do this, I was very honored, and I'll probably never shut up about it. So thank you for having me. How have you been lately?
I've been good. Trying to keep cool in this heat wave, but I don't know if it's gonna leave. So maybe it's not a wave.
I mean, look, we expect it every year. We don't know why we're surprised by it, but it felt like it got here late, but it's certainly here now.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely had some mural delays thanks to the either rain or the heat. It's like, but that's very DC. So I expect.
Well, we're in now. Well, speaking of, let's dive into your work. Miguel, let's go ahead and go forward one if we can. Okay, so your work, colorful for sure, very colorful. We've talked about this before, but we're gonna act like we never have. So talk to me about it. This is pulled from your website, but I think it really encapsulates your hands. Hands are very prominent in your work, but the color is like, there's pink and then there's Trap Bob pink. There's purple and then there's Trap Bob purple. So talk to me a little bit, let's go back some, but introduce kind of where you get your inspiration from, and then why the use of color so prominently in your work.
Yeah, so early on for me, before I was even thinking about being an artist or really being anything, so to preface that, I'm Ethiopian and I am Ethiopian Orthodox Christian. And so I spent like hours and hours and hours in church. Our services were maybe like average 5 to 6 hours. And all the art that we had was all depicting Black people. So it was all the biblical artwork that you would regularly see, but I mean, I guess not as regularly, with Black people and in a very specific style that is native to Ethiopia. And so I would just stare at them. And I think that's where my love for color really came in, because I saw how it was used as a type of storytelling and how it kind of did its own work behind the scenes of the art itself. And I also really pulled my bold style. I think like loving hard outlines and contrast. I think I really got that from just being so satisfied looking at those pieces. And so when I did get into my own work, I found that my style, even from being very young, maybe like kindergarten, was still similar to how I draw now, very like outlined and colorful and bold. And so in my own work, for me, when I see a piece, I realize I don't really look at necessarily the subject matter, but more so the composition using the color. And so what draws my eyes to, you know, what part of the piece, what's working well together. And it's hard for me to really see anything that isn't colored well and, you know, understand the picture fully. So I'm always really drawn to like very contrasted, almost neon bright colors and
Yeah.
just a creative use of it. And so in my own work, I usually have a palette of maybe like 3 to 4 colors. And most of the time it's pink and blue. Those are my absolute favorite colors.
Mm-hmm.
And they definitely have to be a specific tone. It can't just be like, you know, bubblegum pink or sky blue. There's like a certain pigment that I look for when I know like this is what I want to use in my work. And from there, I really just play with the way the composition is using the colors and see how just the changing of colors and placement can change the feeling and the message that you get from the work. And so
Yeah.
I see it as like a conversation I think your eyes kind of have with the work when you see it.
Yeah. There's I mean, these 8 that we're looking at here, I love that they all sort of make me kind of just go, like there's a natural sort of zoom in. But what I'm curious about is where you have, I'm assuming this is Gucci Man down the bottom left.
Yes.
Gucci Man. Okay. So Gucci Man, where you have, you know, let me back up a little bit. Where there's like this pink background, do you try to find a way to incorporate pink into all your work and purple into all your work? Because there's some that leave it out, but for me, there's that pink. Do you always start with pink, or do you kind of play with the background a little bit to see how a color like that red of the flower, obviously pulling background on behind him, but do you always start with pink and then go from there? Or what's your process like for, how do you find the base, and is the center color the more important, or is it the base that you want, that you're sort of wanting to start with first?
Yeah, I really, I think it really starts from what the piece is about. And so a lot of times, I think when I'm like celebrating somebody or, you know, honoring them in some way, it usually almost always starts with like a pink or orange, and even sometimes yellow. I just see those as kind of like bright introductory colors. And then I can play with contrasting with other colors that might not usually be found together. But from there, it kind of becomes a game of, you know, what do I want to work this with? Where do I want this color to really take over? So like you have the Gucci piece, it was more of like a romantic idea behind it. I got it from like a Gucci song, like him and Bruno Mars. And he was saying like Gucci Berry White, I'm singing, you know. And so that, you know, fit the mood there. And then you have like Meg Thee Stallion here, who is a hot girl, and that obviously was like going to be mainly red and bringing the fire in, and then seeing another color that would, you know, complement that and bring the extra energy that it needed. But then you go to like Tierra Whack. I know with that piece, I was really interested in finding like an orange base to go with the palette, because I just felt like it worked well with her skin tone and I don't know, even her music. So sometimes I'll associate like a feeling or an idea with a color and then kind of play with it from there.
Okay, so I'm interested. I'm interested in talking to you about this Little Mermaid inspired, not even inspired piece, but this Little Mermaid piece. There's some context that maybe some people aren't aware of, and I'm assuming this is for the new take on the Disney classic, correct?
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think it feels like so early too, but it's just really cool that you already have this together. Can you talk to this talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so I created this piece after the news came out that Halle Bailey had gotten the role. And as excited as I was to see a Black mermaid and just to see something different than, you know, what I was growing up seeing,
Yeah.
people were also upset about it and complaining and all this crazy stuff. And I just thought like, wow, this is such a celebratory, beautiful thing to see and to be able to experience. And I loved especially just the fact that she was going to have red dreads. I think that was such an amazing way to portray the character. And honestly, I don't really see it about skin color. I just see it like, you know, we need to have a change. We're talking about cartoons and animation, you know, anything can happen in that world. So this piece, I really wanted to just kind of celebrate the magic of the moment and you know, kind of look into the future of how it's going to feel to see her playing that part.
Yeah, I know when we spoke last year, we talked about representation, and I think for me especially, I think there is still a lot of learning to be done, right? Like we can't just we can't get Black Panther and be like, okay, you got a Marvel comic, like you're good, that's good, right? There has to be a continuation, right? And I had sort of a kind of an aha moment. Yes, don't even ask me where the idea came from, but I'm clicking around the Netflix, watching, you know, trying to find a movie to watch, and I stumble upon I Know What You Did Last Summer. I haven't seen that movie since probably it came out in theaters, and thought nothing of it at the time when I was much younger. And there's this moment where Sarah Michelle Gellar, she's on stage, all the people in the crowd are white, all the contestants are white, the MC is white, and granted, I haven't watched that movie, and there's a laundry list of movies that you can pick from, but seeing that when I was a kid was normal. And so like as I get older and as I look back at those films, it's like, was there worry that if Sarah Michelle Gellar was cast as a person of color, that movie wouldn't be as successful or wouldn't be this? And it's an interesting thing that I think no matter what role comes out with a person of color cast, there's always some sort of like, you can't do that. You're getting upset over like that's not even a real person. It's not a real person from history being portrayed by somebody of person of color or vice versa. But I think there's so much conversation to still be had and so much learning to still be had over that topic. But when I saw this, I was like, that's not her take on Little Mermaid. That's a tribute to the upcoming Little Mermaid film. So that was really cool. I really like seeing that. Missy Elliott, right there. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yes, of course. So obviously, like Missy Elliott, huge inspiration, literally through my entire life, you know, beyond doing art. And she had just dropped a music video. I can't remember the name of the video now, but this art director she'd been working with a long time had done it with her. And it was kind of like the first time she'd put out music in a little while, and this album was getting a lot of promo. And so I saw the video, and there was this scene with her like wearing these headphones, chewing bubble gum, and she had these super long braids that were being used as double Dutch jump ropes. And I remember seeing that scene and just like my jaw dropped, and it was like I knew I had to draw it, and I couldn't believe I hadn't drawn her, you know, before. But that moment really was what pushed me to want to do it. And so I shared the piece, and somebody who was working with the art director on the next music video for this same album saw the piece and had seen, I had like an exhibit in Atlanta at the time. It was 29 rooms. And so they had seen my exhibit there and then looked me up and saw that I had posted this and reached out to me to do some animation assistance on the next music video, which was Drip Demeanor. Yeah. And so I got to go out to do the video shoot, and it was unbelievable. It was experience I'll never forget. And it really was so inspiring. You know, the fact that an illustration I did could take me to the set of this person that like, I literally never considered, you know, meeting, let alone working with. Yeah. And it's still surreal. And it was actually her birthday this past week. And so I had posted it and kind of was going back through my pictures, and I still was like, I just can't believe this.
Yeah.
So
I think sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a special piece. That's all.
Yeah. I think that's an important moment to sort of footnote of like, you know, in in creative and in artistry, I think sometimes we get so bogged down with what other people are maybe asking us to create or paying us to create, or we sort of forget of like, you know, why we create in our own time, or why we even just started, whether it's putting pen to paper or putting paintbrush to a canvas or taking photos. That sometimes those moments of just like, hey, I'm feeling inspired, I want to kind of work on my own thing. You never really know where your work's going to end up, or where it's going to be seen, or who's going to see it. So I love that story of just like kind of doing something for yourself, and then it leading its way to you just being with Missy Elliott, who, talk about like way ahead of their time. I mean, I was a teenager when she was first coming up, and you talk about something just inherently comfortable with themselves and using color and animation and just expression to totally be a mirror of who they were and put themselves out there to the world. So that's really cool. Okay, Miguel, can we move forward? So I touched on it on the last slide, but I really want to talk about your use of hands, because it's very emotive. So we're going in 2 stages here. We're going to work our way down, but talk to me about their use of hands. They're very prominent in your work. They're very much in the focus. Where does that come from?
So hands were really what I started out with when I was painting, especially. I found that I was kind of bored with the idea of drawing people. I thought it was, simple and made too much sense almost. I think it's obvious that if you're trying to tell a story, you can show people in a room or what have you. And I really wanted to create things that didn't exist. That was my biggest thing starting out. And that's why I really love space, which you can kind of see through my work, is just this kind of playground of creating whatever I want and not having to worry about rules of like, you have gravity and things need to be on the floor, or you need a body attached to the one thing that makes things happen, which would be the hand. And on top of that all, I knew that that was a way I could relate to all of my audience, because it didn't become about your background, your culture, your gender. It was about something that you clearly understood. If you see a hand doing something, you get the message. And I think it can help us even just think of the perspective of maybe whose hand is it when you're looking at the piece. And so, yeah, they definitely took over a lot of my work. I found so many different avenues to apply it to, even here with this Nats logo, when they won the championship, it was like, the perfect way to put my spin on the logo, but also kind of display this idea of like ownership over this success and kind of proudly holding what you've worked so hard for.
Yeah, that's really cool. Your work has this somebody was describing this band to me a few years back, and it was like very like upbeat, and if you heard it sort of just in passing, you would think it was this like really upbeat fun music, and they said it's happy sad music. And your work has this sort of like really dark these kind of like, even like the hands, right? They're very like almost Wizard of Ozzy and sort of like spooky, right? But then like the colors are so vibrant and in your face. I don't quite know the way to describe it, but it has this sort of like happy, sad, sound to it or feel to it. Can you describe a little bit of that juxtaposition of that vibrancy with also sort of that darker side or that deeper meaning?
Yeah, that's amazing that you saw that, because that's definitely something that I find myself doing a lot. I'm a very like, I love humor and comedy, and I can be cynical for sure often. And a lot of my work ends up having like a kind of humorous twist to it, but it's usually applied to something that's a little more serious or a frustration that I deal with. So I think a lot of times the designs themselves come off across a little cynical or sarcastic, or just kind of poking fun at an idea. And that kind of goes back to just culturally, Ethiopians are very humorous and basically can walk away from a situation without making a joke of it, even down to like some of the darkest things. And so I've always found that so beautiful. I think that's a great way to cope with things. It's a way to always end smiling, no matter what the situation is. And that's a reminder that hard times come and go, but you'll always be okay at the end. And that's something that helped me really stay motivated in becoming an artist early on and not knowing where I was going, just having faith and staying consistent. And so in my work, a lot of times it has that kind of play on both sides of, this is a serious problem or worry or issue that I or someone else may deal with, but we can still all come together and laugh about it.
Yeah, I really, it's just something I've always noticed about your work. There's this sort of like, I think it's the like, it's very canvas representation of like when you see people that you haven't seen in a while and you're like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm good. And you say, oh, I'm good. But like deep down, you're like, I'm not good, but like, I'm not going to get into it right now. Like there's this very like, oh, look at all this vibrant color, but there's such a deeper meaning. And I just love that. And I've always picked up on that about your work. But okay, let's move our way down, but sort of make our way up. Oh, sorry. Go back, Miguel. Sorry. I was trying to make like a metaphor. We're going to talk about you being up in space. You touched on it. It's a part of your centennial logo. Your I don't know if it's a love affair, but you reference space a lot and sort of the outer world. This was for PBR. You got to put your take on one of their cans. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, so this was, I actually entered a contest they have every year to design the cans. And so I won, and my art was on this 24-ounce can. And it's like a UFO dropping off or picking up a beer, PBR, from this hand that's kind of definitely in space and in its own world. And, I kind of put like the pillars around it to show that it was almost like a ceremony or special ritual maybe in this planet or this world that this was existing in. And I loved the play on the idea of, like, which way is it going? Are they donating this beer to, the rest of space and, giving that idea of sharing it, or maybe just getting a delivery and having some self-care time.
Yeah.
And so I loved that play on it, and the fact that it was on this 24-ounce can that let the design be, take up that vertical space and really give the idea of being in space and, gravity just kind of changing things a little bit. I just think space is this, I don't know, it's like an open market of ideas. You really can get away with anything. Even when I think about how people look at, aliens, like how we draw aliens in cartoons and movies, it's always kind of the same take, and it's always kind of based on human attributes already, and it's funny. I saw like a cartoon someone made, and it was like two birds talking, and they were saying like, do you think there could be another species or a thing in this world that is as smart as us or is the superior? And they were like, yeah, it has to have wings. That's what something superior would have. And it has to have a strong beak and all these things that are only native to that species. And it's kind of small thinking to think that if there's more out there, that it's going to be something like us. So I love that, that you can get away with anything. You can really push limits and put together ideas that maybe wouldn't make sense, and even just kind of throw things up in the air.
Yeah. So I'm curious, because when I see things like this, when you sort of first come across this contest, do you create just for like that surface, or was there like tying it into the entire can, or was there like sort of much like if you get commissioned for a mural, right? You have a confined space. Did you know the space that you had going into it, and did that play a role into what you created?
Yeah, so they gave us like a template of where the text is going to be at the bottom and just kind of the frame of it. And I did have to take into consideration the fact that, this is a cylinder, the design isn't going to lay flat. And how would that play when someone sees it on a shelf, or maybe is looking at it with the can turned and can't see the whole design? And so going into it, I knew that this UFO, beer in hand, were going to be the main focal point that would definitely be seen from the front of the can. And then kind of just having, something going on both sides so that it was balanced, but also made you want to turn the can around if you weren't seeing the whole picture. So that's definitely, I think, important, is thinking about composition and kind of the final destination of where the design goes, which is very similar to, a mural, and thinking how it wraps around a building, or if there's a door or window that's obstructing the design, and taking all those things into consideration.
Yeah. again, the use of hands. It's such a smart way. And I love the, like, are you sending it up? Are they dropping it off? It's just really cool. I remember actually going to somewhere and you had like a little launch party for it there. I still have the pin. It sits over there in a little bucket that has all my like collectible pins. Okay, speaking of surfaces, we're gonna kind of change gears here, but Miguel, can we go forward now one more time? So this moment from last year, I don't want to read the tweet, but I want to talk about it because last year, you know, what was what else went on last year? Oh, that's right, global pandemic, right? Amongst everything that we had going on last year, we hopefully have done a lot of learning. And again, we talked about it earlier, still so much learning to do, but this moment, before I get into kind of what happened and really even hash on that, I want to talk to you about and just kind of recognize that this is like this, you finding out about this and somebody sending you this, I think is such a testament to what you've built for yourself and how proud you've made people in this city, that we see all the times of, you know, these viral videos of people doing things and people kind of just minding their business and, you know, oh, that's not me. But this video, the one thing that really stuck out when you posted this was just how passionate that person was in protecting your space and your art. And for anybody that's not familiar with this story, essentially, I avoided showing the lady's face because I didn't want to give her any airtime. But a lady, as you can see, just basically ruined her artwork. Do you want to talk about, not this moment yet, but what that project was and where that was and why that was important to you?
Yeah, so these were actually 2 picnic tables in Tacoma Park that I painted maybe in August of last year. And they were to just have some social distance seating for people to eat outdoors while the weather was nice, but also to have a message of activism and fighting racial injustices. And so it was 2 tables that were kind of reflecting each other. This one said justice, and then another one with a girl with blue hair said, let's say, change. Yeah, so that was the project.
And there's a reason why I want to talk to you about this, because as a muralist, as an artist, you can go around the city and see murals all over the place. And I think not having any context and understanding really how other cities operate, the one thing that you don't really need a lot of time in DC to understand is how supportive companies are, museums, businesses, of saying, hey, we've got this canvas, come and create, right? I think we've seen that DC has a thriving arts community and it's growing, and a lot of people want to lend their space. But as a muralist, where do you, this is obviously way out of line, this is uncalled for, but if you're, say you're driving around and you see one of your murals, but then another artist has come through and maybe tagged through it, where does there become a line of, okay, that this is somebody else's canvas now? There's a I think it's like the sport of graffiti, and maybe it's a lack of understanding it from my perspective, and that's why I'm here and I want to learn. But where do you draw the line of like, you're defacing my work versus like that kind of what we think of traditional graffiti of like, now this is my canvas, I'm creating on it. Do you have a take on that? And I guess maybe, am I making any sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's easily a fine line. And it's funny, even when I'm making or painting murals, people will say like, you know, they'll say like, oh, are you making some graffiti? Or are you making street art? And not even in a way to say like, oh, you're not supposed to be doing it, but people don't always understand the differences. And so what I do is definitely just murals, and you know, I would just call it a painting, and street art is a whole different type of style and just way of creating. And that also is closer to graffiti. To me, I believe that, you know, the art world is, it's like there's rules and then there's not rules. But at the end of the day, you have to think about community as well. And I think that's when you start kind of setting boundaries. And I think that if you see an artist that maybe is commissioned for a mural or create something that's obviously intentional and there for a purpose, it's kind of to be left alone. I think when it
Mhm.
comes to tagging and that kind of competitive side, you would know when someone's creating that type of work and where there's
Okay.
the space to kind of play that. And so I've had like my murals tagged before, and it's rare in my experience, and I don't see too many like real murals getting tagged up, but at the end of the day, it takes away from the community because I'm not here to compete wall to wall and go mess up somebody else's work. And I just think it's you have respect for people the same way that you would want it
Yeah.
for the most part.
Yeah, I remember so vividly watching this play out on Twitter, and this lady, and just the hate that was just like so prevalent in just the like, there's no way that you would, first off, who's spending that much time at a picnic table on their own accord, right? Like who is like, of course you were commissioned, and it shouldn't take more than a hey, you shouldn't do that to like leave the table alone. And it was just, of everything that has happened, not only just in the last year, but just in our history, it's just it was really sad to see. But I found so much like I don't even know if joy is the right word, but I just loved so much that your community was just so quick to like defend you, right? Versus like, just, that's not my table, or it's not my problem, I'll just leave it alone. But if you, I didn't want to share the video, but if you go and you can easily find it, on Trap Bob's Twitter. Your friend was passionate. They had your back. So that was cool. But on this, and kind of speaking of last year, in response to a lot of the protests that we had here in DC, over the murder of George Floyd, and really just the endless sort of seemingly like news updates of people of color, black men, black women being killed at the hands of police, for as long as we can remember now. There's always a response from whether it's like major corporations or even local businesses to, hey, we want to put up, where we stand, and we want to put up our stance. Let's hire a local artist. Is there, and I've talked to Gary and Taman, the guys over at Creative Theory, about they had done some work to create a badge for Google businesses to identify a Black-owned business. And one of the questions I asked was, is there a hope that this no longer becomes a thing, that we don't need to denote that it is a Black business, or that you should support it because it's a Black business? Is there the hope that maybe that's not just the only time these corporations come in? And I think we see it with the Juneteenth celebrations, the Pride celebrations, where these major companies come in and say like, oh, we've got to get like a local artist in that community to create something during this time frame. And I'm kind of challenging it at the same time, but is there the hope that no longer becomes the reason why artists are hired, especially artists of color, people of color are hired? But where do you think it needs to go from there if that's not the case?
Yeah, I definitely think that, the goal is to get to a point where we don't need to have these specifications and, to even have to be an artist and worry if the only reason you're getting work is because protests are happening. For me personally, I don't call myself a Black artist. I'm clearly Black. My work is Black. I don't want to be, the greatest Black artist. I want to be the greatest artist. And it's, like I said, very obvious that I'm Black, and in the spaces that I'm in, I don't need to, come in and say, hey, I'm the Black panelist or what have you. I'm just the artist that's there. And because of who I am and my background, I have that with me, and I can open doors for other people, thankfully. But I don't know if it'd be the same if I'm always, putting that first, because it can create a situation where, you do get a certain type of work. And I think that really what's important is that the people who should be doing the work are doing the work. So if this is coming down to subject matter that fits a Black experience, especially a Black woman, then it makes sense for me to do the work. What I find frustrating is, during all these protests and these issues coming up, everyone is so excited and feels the need to speak on things or make a post or put out artwork or whatever. And I still see the lack of understanding of, giving the opportunities to the people that it really concerns. You lose the whole thing if you're, hiring a white woman to, let's say, do a project where this type of message is involved and it's coming from an experience.
Mhm.
And so a lot of it becomes performative. And I think that real change happens in day to day between individuals. I don't care about a mural necessarily. Of course, I believe in the power of art, and I think it's important to reflect what the community believes. And this is a part of, history documentation that we're going to see later on and remember. But that doesn't mean that we don't deal with the same issues behind the scenes. It's just a thing to keep us inspiring so that we can create real change. But beyond that, what we need is real equality.
Mhm.
Juneteenth being a holiday, that's great, sure. But what does that really mean? Because really we're all celebrating when we all didn't go through it, and we all are not affected by the changes of it, like how we just had July 4th pass, but Black people were not free when that declaration was passed. So we're kind of skipping over, what matters here. And not that I don't think that things should be, you want to send a message, right? I studied marketing in undergrad. I didn't study art. And so I understand the power of just influence, and how the fact that you can get all these corporations to put out messages and feel like they need to address certain things is powerful and important and a big part of what is going to create the change. But the performative side of it, not so much. It really comes down to the true intention behind it.
Yeah, I saw a video. I think it was like, quite honestly, July 1st, and it was like at the end of Pride Month, and it was this, like, the video started and it said like June 30th, and they had like all these major companies and the Pride flag incorporated with their logo, and then July 1st turn around and everybody's logo's back to it. And I think a lot of people have had a problem with that, and it's in that line of performative that you mentioned. But I think when it comes to even to honestly share a story a moment that really humbled me last year. And I went down to Black Lives Matter Plaza and was there one of the evenings, and I think what we remember as kind of one of the most eruptive. There was a lot of fires outside. It was the day before the other person that we don't speak about anymore came out and like took his photo up. But
Yeah,
I'd taken some photos, and I just happened to have a friend who worked for the Atlantic, and I'd like posted a few photos on Instagram, and she messaged and she said, "Hey, can you send a Dropbox? We need some photos." And one of mine ended up getting picked up by the Atlantic, which at that time was a big deal for me. It was the second time I'd ever been. It was only on digital, but it was the first really like major like news publication that I'd ever used my work. And I was really excited about it. And a friend of mine came to me and he said, "Not right now. Like, take your photos, enjoy your photos, but like, could you have said like, yeah, I do, but let me send some other photographers to you." And it was very, it's a moment that I don't think I'll ever forget, of just somebody. I think also what I really enjoyed is that they felt comfortable enough to tell me like, "Hey, now's not your moment. Take 5, grab some bench." And I continued to go down to Black Lives Matter protests to be a part of it, but I stopped sharing my images. And then instead started sharing a lot of my friends who I felt it was their story to tell. It was their moment to tell. And I don't regret sharing those images with my friend at the time, because it led to a more powerful impact story of learning that, again, I still need to do. Everybody needs to do. You're never too cool to learn. So that's a moment from that time that I'll always remember.
And that's exactly, what I'm saying is that moment where, a real friend had that conversation and, you both made change, even though it was small. If everyone's doing that, then, there's no way that we wouldn't be able to have real long lasting change. So that's great. And, that's great that you were able to learn from it, rather than, it's an easy moment to become defensive or to, spin the story. But that's exactly the type of things that we need people to understand.
Yeah. It was a huge learning moment for me. And again, I would have, at the end of the day, I would have much rather, and on a larger scale, never have to have learned that story, meaning never would have seen the murder of George Floyd play out online, and never would have had to join the crowd down at Black Lives Matter. I wish all of that would not have happened, but as a result of that happen, I was able to learn from it. And yeah, but moving on to speaking of doing work for people, Miguel, can we slide one? There we go. So I just want to point out that I did go to Tumblr's website for this, which is just like the millennial in me. Can we talk about this?
Yeah.
Just doing work for NASA. No big deal. No big deal. Literally in space.
I mean, it's I still like, I cannot believe it. I can't even believe that this is in front of me now. Yeah, this was definitely a dream come true. Being able to honor Mary W. Jackson for the renaming of the NASA headquarters in DC, which I didn't even realize I was passing so often until, you know, we were setting this up, and it was like I saw everything for the first time. So, you know, just even being a DC resident, it's so great to have been a part of this and to, you know, properly be involved in a project that it made sense. And it was me along with 5 other women of color, artists and creatives in DC, in the DMV area. And we all did our kind of own take on a portrait of Mary W. Jackson to celebrate and to present to her family. And so they had the renaming ceremony, which almost didn't happen because of COVID, and was very much so on a small scale to fit it. So it was a live broadcast, and a small few of us were in the headquarters to be a part of it. And so I got to go up and speak about the project and Mary W. Jackson, and then present our work to her granddaughter, Wanda Jackson. And so they might still be on display at the headquarters, but they'll be on display at other headquarters around the country and in a new facility that is opening next year, I believe. And yeah, this was just, I mean, unbelievable in all parts. Obviously, the space aspect is like, again, something I never even, like, as much as I love space, I really never thought about really working with NASA. And it was really their first time doing something like this. So it's unbelievable. And on top of all of that, to be commemorating this amazing woman who is just, you know, like truly, truly, I mean, I call a lot of things out of this world, but this woman is out of this world, and just broke barriers across the board, not only as a Black person, not only as a woman, but just an engineer. And she literally opened the doors for so many others. And you know, no one deserves to have that building named after them. And what's crazy is that they told me that the DC headquarters was the only one that didn't have a name. And so it was just, you know, absolutely perfect. And they have a huge sign that you can see from the road. And I mean, it was like, I felt like I went to space. And came back. It was incredible.
What do you do when, like, was it just like Kevin at NASA? Like, who, like, what do you do when NASA calls your phone? Did they already have your number? Did they have your number already?
Like they know everything. They like, they could just like land with all the information you need. No, it was like, I mean, I really couldn't believe it. Even while we went through the process, it didn't fully feel real, because obviously it was all virtual and you know, emails, but you know, to actually do the presentation and to go to NASA itself was just, it was epic. It really was. So now my goal is to be the first artist in residence in space. So I'll let you know how that one goes.
Jeez. Okay, so before I got one more question about this, but for anybody that's in, if you want to add a question, we'll leave a few minutes at the end for some questions with Trap Bob. So please feel free in the Zoom function of the Q&A down at the bottom. Please feel free to drop in a question, and we'll see if we have some time at the end, which hopefully we'll save some time for. Okay, but on this, when you get a project like this, or when you get the opportunity like this, there's the want and probably the desire to reflect yourself as an artist, but how much of that gets sort of, I don't want to say overrun, but ruled out by doing justice to who you're painting, who you're you know, whose image you're bringing to life through your work. Where does that line sort of fall, or where does that balancing act come into play?
The way I see it is I am applying my take and my style on whatever the subject is at the time. And that's part of the reason I love freelancing is that, someone gives me a prompt or a theme or just something simple enough for me to start with, and I can really just, do it the way that I see it. And that is how I've always approached my work and how I've gotten a lot of work as well, because similar to what I did with the Missy Elliott piece, I just create what I like and how I see things and, let people be drawn to that versus me feeling like I need to change the way I work to work with someone. And that's something that I always told myself I didn't want to do. I want to make sure that this is really on my terms because being an artist, I wanted that freedom to create the way I want and to change the world from my own perspective and work. And so, what was great with this project was that I already have done a series celebrating Black women that is similar even to the way that I went about this design. And what I do is try to just bring both of us into the piece, like find a way to reflect just how amazing and, like I said, out of this world she is. And how do we, bring that into this kind of loud, colorful space that I use kind of literally. And so I really love the idea of, I always use space as the background, but then to kind of bring Earth into it just a little bit and bring the rocket in and show, how she's on her way and has been elevating us and just to see it all together. I really love how this one came out. I think it might be one of my favorite pieces I've probably made. And the fact that it can be a great art piece, but also honor somebody so powerful is my favorite part of it.
Yeah, I'm curious, and I don't want to expose too much, but from phone call to I don't know how, if you're anything like me and you save files, there's like underscore final one underscore draft underscore v2 v7 from phone call to okay, this is the final export. What kind of timeline are we looking at for you, or for this, or even maybe just your work in general?
Yeah, I actually work pretty fast, to be honest. I mean, I could put something together really in like a day if I needed to, and I've done that with projects. This one, there was a good amount of meetings and just taking like process videos and playing around with concepts. So I think probably in my actual creation process, this was probably like a couple weeks.
Okay. What kind of research did you do? Or when it's maybe, I don't know to say, so you have the Nipsey piece. I don't know if there's necessarily research that needs to be done on Nipsey, but for something like this, was there research involved before you started your process?
Yeah, I definitely did a lot of Googling and just looking at the history of her work and even her life outside of working with NASA. And obviously I watch Hidden Figures again because any excuse to watch it. But yeah, looking over her life and all that she's done. And I also loved looking at just like Google images of people. I think that being able to see a lot of options, I always find that one where I'm like, this is them, like kind of how the Nipsey one. It's like when I saw that picture, I was like, this is the way I want him to be seen in this piece. Mm-hmm. And I kind of just combined them all. And I really hate being literal. So I try not to take too much from what I read. I just kind of try to have some ideation and see what I think would represent that. And so that part can be fun, but tricky. But it always comes out into something that I feel is really reflective and not, like textbook, has some type of creative twist to it and is again creating something that doesn't exist.
I gotcha. Well, I'll close up this segment of talking about NASA, but all I'm saying is, look, if you get the call to go do a mural at Area 51, I am available to be a painting assistant, a production assistant. My schedule is free. So don't forget me.
I won't, you got it.
Before we'll see, let me click this box and see if we got any questions coming up, which is fine. If not, people just like to listen, it's okay. So we'll move on to the end, but again, with the hands and Trap Bob look, I just want to say, our mediums are different, you with your canvas and me with my camera, but I have the privilege living in this city and being able to see your work, and I've had the privilege to be able to meet you, and now honestly interview you twice. I'm not good at shouting people out of nowhere, but you know, face to face over Zoom, I will just let you know that how you carry yourself, you're unapologetically Trap Bob, both in person, online, and through your work. That it really is just like a privilege for me to be able to do this. I'm getting kind of nervous now, so I apologize for that. But thank you so much for having me. And you know, I'm sure you've inspired more people that have probably given you, oh, did we lose it? No. Okay. So we're good still. Yeah, so just thank you so much for all the inspiration that you've given myself and probably so many artists in this area and probably around the world for that matter. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. No, you're awesome. And I'm so glad that we've, been able to have this conversation again, which, like I had mentioned in the beginning, was a perfect matchup because we had done the photo shoot at the Phillips Collection a couple of years ago.
Yep. That's how we first met.
Yep. And we did a private tour and you were shooting different creatives with their favorite piece and what they loved about it. And so, I felt like it was perfectly aligned, and obviously the great work that you do in the community. I'm always about DC's creative community. That is my favorite thing about being in the city. And I truly feel like I wouldn't be as inspired if I was anywhere else. And so, it's so great that on so many different levels, we can relate and have kind of run into each other and been able to support each other. And what you do with Walk with Locals is just the definition of that, across the board. And even, it doesn't have to be to a professional point. You're just bringing people together that really enjoy each other. And that is what I think is the best part of the creative community here. People are just wanting to be out there and wanting to create and to be around others that inspire them. DC obviously has its political look, I think to the rest of the country and to the world. And it's easy to not expect or to ignore the creative community. But I think the fact that we face those challenges and are still very seen and very known is so awesome. So again, I'm so thankful that, we get to work together.
Okay, wait, let's see. Do we have any questions? Is there any questions? No, it's okay. That's all right. But if people do have questions and they want to reach out, where can they find you?
Instagram, TrapXBob.
TrapXBob. And on Twitter, right?
Yeah, just Trap Bob on Twitter.
Trap Bob. All right. Well, folks, I think we're a little bit over our time, but that's okay. We squeezed out a little bit more. Miguel, do we need to bring you in and wrap this thing up?
No, we're all good. Thank you so much, you guys. This was really wonderful.
Thanks for having us, Phillips Collection. Go check out all the Centennial logos, everybody.
Yes, they're out of this world. Thank you, Miguel, so much for having us. This was awesome, and we love Phillips Collection.
Woo! Team Phillips. All right, Trap Bob. See you later, bud.